This is the Lex Beyond podcast by Lexicon Labs. I'm Lex.
And I'm Bianca.
So imagine a legal loophole so massive and created entirely by accident that it's currently threatening to just fundamentally rewrite all the rules of sports gambling in America.
Yeah, and not just rewrite them, but potentially nationalize an entire multi-billion-dollar industry.
Right. And, allow Wall Street to basically take bets on, well, literally anything. We're talking congressional elections down to, the color of Taylor Swift's wardrobe.
It is wild.
It's insane. Today we're exploring this custom-tailored journey for you, breaking down what people are calling the Kalshi story. Our mission today is to unpack this incredibly complex, super high-stakes legal saga.
Because on the surface, it just looks like this niche, sort of boring regulatory spat about the definition of financial contracts.
Exactly, like stuff that makes your eyes glaze over.
Wow.
But underneath, it's a backdoor revolution. And as I was digging into the materials for this deep dive, there's this Eminem lyric that just perfectly encapsulates the whole thing.
Oh, wait, really? Eminem?
Yeah. It's from Lose Yourself. The line is, he opens his mouth, but the words don't come out.
Okay, yeah, I can see where you're going with this.
Because that is the absolute perfect way to describe how Congress drafted the Dodd Frank Act. They opened their mouths to fix the American financial system, but the exact, precise words they needed to define what is and isn't gambling they just didn't make it onto the page.
They really didn't. And that one single, highly ambiguous word buried in a, 360,000 word piece of legislation.
Yeah, thousands of pages.
Accidentally kicked open the doors to this ultimate national casino. So to really get how we got here, I think we have to look at the roadmap. We're looking at a 3-act structure today.
Right, so Act I is going to be that original legal blunder involving election contracts. Act 2 is the absolute explosion of lawsuits right now.
Huh.
We're talking 90-plus cases across the country.
And then Act 3 is the inevitable Supreme Court showdown and this bizarre game theory trap that the individual states are just walking right into.
Yeah, it's like watching a slow-motion car crash. But, okay, to understand how this prediction market platform outmaneuvered the federal government and threw 50 state governors into a sheer panic, we can't start in the present day. We have to do the pregame.
The historical context here is super important.
Right, because the federal government cracking down on prediction markets is, practically an American tradition at this point.
Oh, absolutely. If you look at the historical timeline, there are really 3 major pillars that set the stage for all of this. The first one takes us back to the early days of the internet with this guy named Jay Cohen.
Okay, yeah, I remember reading about him. He was the offshore guy, right?
Exactly. He basically set up an offshore sports betting operation in Antigua, and his whole logic was, well, I'm not physically in the U.S., so U.S. laws don't apply to me.
Which the Department of Justice probably didn't agree with.
No, they definitely did not. They dusted off the Wire Act, which, by the way, was originally written to take down mobsters making telephone bets.
Oh, wow. So it predated the internet completely.
Completely. But they applied it to the internet anyway, went after Cohen hard, and he actually went to federal prison.
Wow.
Yeah, so the message there was just crystal clear. The federal government does not play around with unregulated betting crossing state or national lines. Period.
Okay, so that's pillar 1, just a huge brick wall. What's the second one?
So the second pillar is in trade. And if you were, extremely online a decade or so ago, you probably remember in trade.
Oh, yeah, the Irish prediction market. They were huge.
Right. They were based in Ireland, and they were the poster child for this whole concept. The idea was you could bet on literally anything. Who's going to win the presidency, whether the Supreme Court is going to strike down a specific law.
I think I saw they even had bets on whether Saddam Hussein would be captured by a specific date.
Yes, because they operated on this theory of the wisdom of crowds, the idea that a market of thousands of people putting real money on the line is just a way more accurate predictor of the future than, some pundit on TV.
Which makes sense in theory, but I'm guessing the regulators hated it.
Oh, they absolutely hated it. The Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC, just brought the hammer down. They sued Intrade, claiming they were offering off-exchange options to U.S. citizens without being registered. It completely destroyed their ability to operate in America.
And there's a really tragic human element to the in-trade story, too.
Yeah, it's incredibly dark. Amidst all this insane regulatory pressure, their CEO, John Delaney, actually died near the summit of Mount Everest.
Yeah, I read he collapsed just 50 meters from the top. And the most heartbreaking part is that his wife had just given birth to a baby girl back home, and he didn't even know.
It's just devastating. And it really marked the end of an era. It cemented this view that prediction markets were basically toxic waste to U.S. regulators.
Okay, so Cohen goes to prison. In-trade is crushed. What's the third pillar?
The third one is much closer to today. It's IRIS exchange. So about 5 years ago, IRIS tried to play by the rules. They didn't go offshore. They went right to the CFTC.
They wanted to do it all above board.
That's exactly. Fully regulated out in the open. And the CFTC just flatly denied them. They said, no, this is contrary to the public interest. This isn't a financial commodity. It's just sports gambling.
Right. So you have this historical track record of just a massive, impenetrable brick wall from the federal government.
Yeah.
But to understand how Kalshi, this modern platform, found a crack in that wall, we have to look at the mortar holding the whole thing together, which is the Dodd Frank Act.
The behemoth.
Yeah. And I know 2008 feels like ancient history to some people, but we really need to establish what Congress was trying to do with this monster of a bill.
We do. Dodd Frank was born directly out of the 2008 financial crisis. The housing market collapsed, huge banks failed, the global economy was practically falling into the ocean.
Why, the whole too big to fail era.
Exactly. And the core of that problem was massive, completely unregulated risk-taking, specifically in what's called the swaps market.
Okay, let's pause right there because swaps market is one of those Wall Street terms that just makes my brain shut off. For you listening, we need to unpack this. What exactly is a swap and why was it so uniquely dangerous in 2008?
It's actually a great question. Think of a swap in its most basic, pure form as financial armor. So let's say you're a farmer. You're planting thousands of acres of corn. The price of corn is going to crash and you'll go bankrupt.
Makes sense. Farming is super risky.
Right. So you find a buyer and you agree to swap the unpredictable future price of your corn for a guaranteed fixed price right now. You are hedging your risk.
So it's basically commercial insurance.
Exactly. It has a real economic purpose.
Yeah.
But by 2008, Wall Street had taken that super basic concept and completely mutated it. They started creating these insanely complex swaps on things they didn't even own.
Like the housing market.
Yes, like betting on whether massive bundles of other people's mortgages would default. So it was no longer a farmer hedging his actual corn. It was speculators making side bets on the collapse of the economy. And that unregulated swaps market had grown to a size that is literally hard to comprehend. We're talking over $400 trillion.
Did you just say 400 trillion?
With a T? Yes.
That's not a typo. That is a number so big it just loses all meaning.
I know, it's wild. So Congress drafts Dodd Frank to rein this in. It's 2,300 pages long. The main goal is to drag that $400 trillion shadow market into the light, giving the CFTC immense power to oversee it and stop excessive risk.
Okay, but buried deep inside those 2,300 pages, Congress also had to deal with these weird little things called event contracts, which is basically what prediction markets use, right?
Precisely, because technically betting on an election or betting on the weather, it's a type of derivative. It's a contingent event.
And to understand Congress's mindset on these event contracts back in 2010 when they wrote Dodd-Frank, we have to look back at a super controversial DARPA project from 2003.
Oh, the Policy Analysis Market, PAM.
Right. And DARPA, for those who don't know, is the Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. They're the military think tank that helped invent the internet. Why on earth were they getting involved in financial contracts?
Well, post 9/11, the military was desperate for better predictive intelligence. And someone at DARPA had read up on that in-trade wisdom of crowds theory and thought, hey, what if we create a futures market for geopolitical risks?
Meaning they wanted people to literally trade contracts on whether a war would break out.
Yes, they wanted indices on civil stability, military disposition, economic health. You could theoretically go online and buy a contract asking, will the U.S. military withdraw from a specific country in 2 years? Or how fast will the non-oil output of Egypt grow?
I mean, I guess I see the logic, but that sounds...
But where it became incredibly toxic and what killed the project was the revelation that people could potentially trade on the likelihood of terrorist attacks.
Oh, wow. Yeah, the optics on that are just horrifying. You're basically saying Wall Street traders could financially profit from a terrorist attack on American soil.
Exactly. It was an absolute political firestorm that killed the project almost immediately. But that memory was incredibly fresh for the lawmakers writing Dodd-Frank a few years later.
Right. They did not want DARPA-style terrorism markets popping up again.
Emphatically no. If you look at the legislative history, there's this fascinating colloquy, which is basically a formal, on-the-record discussion on the Senate floor to establish the intent of a law. It was between Senator Dianne Feinstein and Senator Blanche Lincoln.
And they were specifically talking about how to ban these exact types of markets.
Right. Senator Lincoln argued that, sure, national security threats pose a commercial risk to businesses, like a shipping company might be worried about a port closing due to a threat.
Right, the farmer hedging his corn.
Exactly.
Oh.
But allowing a futures contract on a national security threat crosses a massive ethical line. You're allowing people to bet on destruction. And Senator Feinstein agreed, drawing a super hard line. She explicitly said, a futures market is for hedging. It is not an insurance market.
Okay, so her point is, if a business faces a risk from a threat, go buy traditional insurance. Don't buy a speculative derivative.
Right. Nobody should profit from tragedy.
Okay, let me make sure I'm completely tracking this, because this is the crux of the whole episode. Congress is terrified of 2008 happening again. They are terrified of DARPA-style terrorism betting. So they write this massive 360,000-word law to give the CFTC absolute crushing authority over a $400 trillion market, specifically to prevent excessive risk and to ban toxic betting.
That is the intent, yes.
If that was the intent, how on earth did prediction markets end up using this exact same law to legalize betting on literally everything?
Because of the Eminem lyric, the words didn't come out right.
Unbelievable.
When Congress wrote this specific rule giving the CFTC the power to ban these event contracts, they didn't just write a blank check. They didn't say you can ban anything you don't like. They created a very specific, defined list of triggers.
Okay, so let's talk about that list, because this is Act 1.
Mhm.
This is the Election Contract Blunder.
Yeah.
Under Dodd Frank, the CFTC can review and ban a contract if it's contrary to the public interest, but only if it involves one of 6 specific categories.
Right. Category 1, activity that is unlawful under any federal or state law. Category 2, terrorism. Category 3, assassination. Category 4, war. Category 5, gaming. And Category 6 is just this vague catch-all for other similar activity.
And Category 5, gaming. That is the word that just broke the entire system. Because common sense and literally a century of legislative history suggests that when lawmakers say gaming, they mean gambling.
Exactly.
But they didn't write gambling. They wrote gaming.
And that definitional trap is exactly what Kalshi capitalized on. So here's the setup for the massive blunder. Kalshi, a prediction market, wants to launch event contracts on U.S. congressional control. They want to let you buy contracts on which political party is going to win the House and the Senate.
Which is, you know, a huge deal.
Huge! So Kalshi follows the rules. They self-certify the contracts. The CFTC initiates a review, and 90 days later, they deny them. The CFTC says elections are contrary to the public interest, and they fall under the gaming category, so we're banning them.
And Kalshi immediately sues the CFTC. And this is where we have to talk about that tactical error the CFTC made in federal court.
Yeah.
Because as a normal observer, you would think the CFTC, this massive agency overseeing global commodities, would just walk into court, slam their fists on the table and say, we have broad authority over all contingent event contracts. An election bet is not a commercial hedge. It has no economic purpose, so we're banning it.
That's what you'd think, but they didn't do that at all.
No, they did the exact opposite.
They voluntarily surrendered their own power. Instead of claiming broad authority, the CFTC attorneys tried to thread this impossible legal needle. Kalshi actually call it steering between Scylla and Charybdis.
The mythical sea monsters. Okay, explain how that metaphor applies to a bunch of lawyers in Washington.
So on one side, you have the first monster. The CFTC did not want to argue that gaming meant any contingent event. Why? Probably because they were terrified of the workload. If gaming means any contingent event, then the CFTC would be legally obligated to review every single bizarre, hyper-specific contract anyone ever dreamed up to make sure it wasn't contrary to the public interest.
They didn't want that regulatory nightmare. They don't have the staff for that.
Right, they wanted to avoid that monster. But on the other side, the second monster, they still needed their definition of gaming to be broad enough to capture an election contract so they could legally ban Kalshi.
Okay, so how did they try to split the difference?
They concocted this incredibly narrow, totally gerrymandered definition. They stood in front of the judge and said, gaming means wagering on games or contests. An election is a political contest, therefore, we can ban it.
Hang on, let me get this straight. By defining gaming only as games or contests, they accidentally told a federal judge that there are massive categories of bets they do not have the power to regulate.
Exactly. And Kalshi's lawyers saw the opening instantly. They pointed out the absolute absurdity of the CFTC's own logic.
What about a contract on whether Mark Zuckerberg and Priscilla Chan are going to get a divorce?
A marriage isn't a contest.
Right. Or And this is honestly my favorite example from all the source materials. What if Kalshi offers a contract on what color dress Taylor Swift wears to a Kansas City Chiefs game? The CFTC, by trying to be clever with the word contest, accidentally admitted they are completely helpless to regulate a derivatives market based on pop star fashion.
It was a catastrophic, completely unforced error. And if you actually go and read the court transcripts from the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals, it is agonizing to read.
I was reading through those. It's literally like a teacher trying to guide a struggling student to the right answer, and the student just stubbornly refuses to say it.
There's this 153-minute oral argument where you can literally feel the judges practically pulling their hair out. The judges were practically begging the CFTC to just claim authority based on the economic purpose test.
Right. The judges basically asked, are you telling us you don't have the authority to review all event contracts?
Yeah.
And the CFTC lawyer actually replies, no.
The judges kept pushing them. They gave them a hypothetical. They said, okay, what about a contract on whether there's going to be a drought? Is that gambling too?
Because the court was looking for a limiting principle. They wanted the CFTC to say, Your Honor, a drought contract has an economic purpose. A farmer can use it to hedge weather risk. But an election contract is just a digital casino. There's no commercial hedging happening.
Exactly. If the CFTC had made that distinction, the court likely would have sided with them. But the CFTC didn't take the lifeline.
They just refused.
They replied to the drought question by saying, no, because gaming can't capture every contingent event. They just kept robotically repeating their contrived definition about games and contests.
There's a brilliant metaphor that summarizes this courtroom disaster perfectly, the Dumbo versus Dory analogy.
Oh, I love that one. It perfectly encapsulates the dynamic. Kalshi came into that courtroom playing Dory, the innocent, forgetful, harmless little fish from Finding Nemo. They essentially argued, look, Your Honor, this massive Dodd Frank act, it's just a minor little rule tweak. It doesn't really give the CFTC much power over our cute little prediction markets.
Right, and the CFTC was supposed to be Dumbo. They were supposed to be the massive, powerful elephant in the room. They're the regulatory body authorized by Congress to oversee a $400 trillion global swaps market.
Yeah.
They should have stomped into that courtroom and said, we are the elephant, we have the power, end of discussion.
But instead of acting like the elephant, the CFTC just nodded along with the little fish. They agreed they didn't have the power, and the result was entirely predictable.
The district court and then the appeals court just saw right through the CFTC's flimsy definition.
Yeah, they ruled that defining an election as a game was a bridge too far. The court basically said, Congress didn't give you the authority to ban this, so Kalshi wins.
And the CFTC just voluntarily dropped its appeal. They walked off the battlefield. But here is the ultimate twist. The thing that turns this from a quirky Washington legal spat into a literal national crisis. In court, Kalshi won by arguing that gaming meant literal games, meaning sports.
Right.
They essentially admitted to the judge that sports betting could not exist under their own interpretation of the law.
They assured everyone that sports were totally off the table. But, and you can't make this up, the very second the ink was dry on their victory over the election contracts, Kalshi turned right around and self-certified sports event contracts anyway.
Wait, how is that legal? Didn't they just argue the exact opposite in front of a federal judge?
They did, but remember, the CFTC had just had its legs cut out from under it. They had just lost this massive, embarrassing court case where the judge told them their definitions were invalid.
Oh, man.
So when Kalshi filed the sports contracts, the paralyzed CFTC did absolutely nothing. They didn't initiate a review, they didn't challenge it, and boom, the federal floodgates were officially blown wide open.
Wow. Okay, so while the CFTC is sitting on its hands in D.C., licking its wounds thousands of miles away, the individual state governors and state gaming commissions are watching this unfold and having an absolute existential panic attack.
And you really have to understand why the states were panicking. Because this isn't about the moral sanctity of sports for them. This is about cold, hard cash.
Right.
The states rely incredibly heavily on casino revenues and the taxes they pull from state-licensed sports books like your DraftKings and your FanDuels.
Because right now, if I want to place a bet on the Super Bowl, I use an app that is regulated by my specific state. My state taxes that transaction, and those millions of dollars go to, like, state roads, state schools, whatever.
Yeah, exactly. But Kalshi operates under the Commodity Exchange Act. They are a federally regulated financial exchange. The moment Kalshi can offer a sports event contract nationally, it completely bypasses the state gaming commissions.
So a user in Ohio or New York can buy a contract on the NFL, and the state gets cut out of the loop entirely.
Entirely. No state regulation, no state taxes. It is an existential financial threat to the state model.
Which brings us to Act 2, the present day, because the situation has basically devolved into what analysts are calling the 90-case spaghetti monster.
That's a great visual.
Yeah, there's this legal tracker online at lexcurrent.com, and if you look at the map of active litigation right now across the country, it literally looks like a toddler threw a bowl of spaghetti at the wall. Everyone is suing everyone.
It's a massive, tangled web, nearly 100 active cases. And the tactical evolution of this warfare is just fascinating to watch. So, in the beginning, the states realized the threat and tried to use the old playbook. They started sending standard cease and desist letters to the prediction market platforms.
Basically saying, hey, you're violating our state gambling laws, shut it down.
Exactly. But the platforms, feeling completely untouchable after beating the CFTC in federal court, basically laughed at the letters. Instead of complying, the platforms immediately sued the states in federal court.
Bold move.
Very bold. They argued what's called federal preemption. They told the federal judges, we are a registered commodity exchange. Federal commodity law overrides state gambling law. The states have zero jurisdiction over us.
So the states aren't stupid. They wised up to that trap pretty quickly, didn't they?
They did. The state attorneys general realized that fighting these platforms in federal court, where federal commodities law is the home turf, was a totally losing proposition. So they stopped sending letters. They just started aggressively suing the platforms in state courts.
They wanted home field advantage.
Exactly, relying strictly on state-level consumer protection and gambling statutes.
Okay, so a state sues a platform in state court. What does the platform do?
The platforms immediately file those cases to federal court. They desperately want to drag it back to the federal arena. But then the states counter by filing what's called a motion to remand.
Remand meaning send it back down.
Correct. The states argue to the federal judge, look, this is purely a state law issue. There is no federal question here. Send it back down to our state court. And the fascinating thing is the states are currently winning this specific tactical battle.
And it's not just a two-player game anymore, is it? The litigation is completely metastasized. I was reading that Native American tribes are now entering the fray.
Oh, yeah. They are suing to protect their historical, treaty-bound gaming monopolies within their states.
Right. And on top of that, you have private class action plaintiffs getting involved.
Wait,
Because at its core, despite all the fancy financial jargon about contingent event derivatives, this is really just a dispute over people losing money on bets.
it is absolute chaos. But the dynamic shifted again recently, and this is where the plot really thickens. We have to talk about the federal government's pivot.
Right, because initially, the CFTC was just going to sit this out. After they lost to Kalshi, the agency seemed totally resigned to their fate. There are records showing that CFTC Commissioner Michael Selig actually told Congress during his confirmation hearings that the agency would stay on the sidelines regarding these state-level disputes.
But then, abruptly, they reversed course.
Really? Why?
The CFTC realized that if the states successfully tear apart the prediction markets in state courts, it fundamentally undermines the CFTC's authority over the national commodities market.
Yeah.
So Commissioner Selig issued a very public warning to the states.
CFTC Chairman Mike Selig here. Over the past year, American prediction markets have been hit with an onslaught of state-led litigation. In response, the CFTC has today filed a friend of the court brief to defend its exclusive jurisdiction over these derivative markets. Prediction markets aren't new. The CFTC has regulated these markets for over 2 decades. They provide useful functions for society by allowing everyday Americans to hedge commercial risks like increases in temperature and energy price spikes. They also serve as an important check on our news media and our information streams. Today, the CFTC is taking an important step to ensure that these markets have a place here in America and have the integrity and resilience and vibrancy that our derivatives markets deserve. To those who seek to challenge our authority in this space, let me be clear. We will see you in court.
We will see you in court.
Wait, meaning the federal government is now intervening in these lawsuits on the side of the prediction markets?
Yes. The United States of America is now actively suing its own individual states to protect Wall Street event contracts.
That is wild. The feds are fighting the states to protect the platforms.
Mm.
But the states are still fighting back hard. There was a huge pivotal moment recently in Michigan, right? A ruling that kind of shocked the platforms.
Yes, a Michigan district court recently ruled that these sports event contracts are not swaps.
Why is that a big deal?
Because the platform's entire argument for federal protection relies on these contracts being classified as financial swaps under the Commodity Exchange Act. By ruling that they are not swaps, the Michigan judge essentially said, federal commodities law does not shield you here.
Wow.
It was a massive blow to federal jurisdiction and a huge tactical victory for the states. They temporarily extended their lead.
Okay, so let me play devil's advocate here. The states are winning the remand battles. They are getting cases sent back to state courts. A federal judge in Michigan just sided with them and said these aren't swaps. They're looking at the scoreboard and they are winning. Why are we concluding that this is ultimately going to end in a disaster for the states?
Because these lower court battles, the remands, the district court rulings, these are just minor skirmishes. The states are winning the battles, but they're going to lose the war. The real war is not going to be decided in a Michigan's court.
Where's it going?
This entire sprawling, messy saga is absolutely destined for the Supreme Court. And as the states march toward Washington, D.C., they are walking completely blindfolded into a massive, fatal logical trap.
Which brings us to Act 3, the Supreme Court game theory trap. Now, to understand how this gets to SCOTUS, we have to look at the likely catalyst. And the irony here is just tripping. The state that is most likely to force this to the Supreme Court is New Jersey.
The irony is incredible if you know your sports betting history.
Which a lot of people probably don't, so let's explain it.
Back in 2017, New Jersey was the state that took the professional sports leagues to the Supreme Court in the famous Murphy v. NCAA case. New Jersey argued that the federal ban on sports betting law was unconstitutional, and they won. New Jersey is literally the reason sports betting is legal across America today.
And now, less than a decade later, New Jersey is heading back to the Supreme Court to try and stop sports betting from happening on financial exchanges.
Exactly. New Jersey recently lost their case against Kalshi in the Third Circuit Court of Appeals. This was in April of 2026. And rather than asking the full appeals court to hear it, they've signaled they are petitioning the Supreme Court directly.
Okay, so imagine we are at the Supreme Court, the justices are seated. What exactly is the legal framework they're deciding on? The legal analysts break this down into a framework called the 3 Ps: preemption, permissibility, and parallelism. I want to try and guess these. Preemption. Is that basically the argument over whose law matters more?
Spot on. Preemption asks, does the Federal Commodity Exchange Act completely override state-level gambling laws? If the Supreme Court says yes, federal law preempts state law, the platforms win instantly.
Okay, the second P is permissibility. Does that mean even if federal law applies, are these specific contracts actually legal under that law?
Exactly right.
Okay, and the third P is parallelism. Can both systems exist at the same time? Can the CFTC regulate the platforms nationally while the states regulate their own local sports books?
Correct. Those are the 3 battlegrounds, and this is where the states are facing a fatal flaw. If you apply game theory to this, think of the famous John Nash bar scene from the movie A Beautiful Mind, where you have to calculate the optimal move based on everyone else's incentives. The states have a clear winning move.
Okay, so to win the ultimate war at the Supreme Court, what is that move?
The best move for the states should be to argue permissibility. They should stand in front of the 9 justices and say, Your Honors, it doesn't matter if this is federal jurisdiction or state jurisdiction. These contracts on sporting events are fundamentally illegal everywhere.
Okay, so that would be the silver bullet. If they argue that, they kill Kalshi. But there's a catch, right? A massive, unavoidable legal bear trap waiting to snap shut.
Oh, a huge one.
I think I see where this is going.
If the states stand up in the Supreme Court and argue that swap markets on sporting events are illegal, they are essentially looking in the mirror.
Wait, how so?
They would be legally admitting that their own state-licensed sports books, the massive tax-generating machines like DraftKings and FanDuel, have been running illegal betting rings this entire time.
Oh my God, because under federal law, all event contracts are considered commodities.
Yes. Former CFTC Commissioner Brian Quintenz, who fascinatingly later joined the board of Kalshi, explicitly laid this out years ago. He stated on the record that all events are commodities under the law. Wow. And if an event is a commodity, any future contract based on that event must be traded on a federally regulated futures exchange. If it is traded off an exchange, it is an illegal future.
And state-licensed sportsbooks are definitely not registered federal futures exchanges.
Exactly. The states have licensed these huge sports betting platforms under their own local gambling laws, completely ignoring federal commodities law. So if the states argue permissibility to destroy the prediction markets, they simultaneously drop a nuclear bomb on their own multi-billion-dollar casino and sportsbook tax revenues.
They would essentially be asking the federal government to arrest their own state operators.
Yeah, pretty much.
That is the ultimate catch-22. To win the lawsuit, they have to destroy their own economy. They'd have to arrest themselves, so they won't do it. The states are too addicted to the tax revenue. They refuse to swallow their pride and make the winning legal argument.
Precisely. And because of that greed, they will purposefully avoid the permissibility argument. When they get to the Supreme Court, they will only argue preemption. They will strictly argue about jurisdiction. They will say, please, Your Honors, just let our state laws apply.
And what happens if they only argue jurisdiction?
If it is strictly a question of preemption, the Supreme Court is highly likely to rule in favor of the federal government.
Really? Why?
Based on a plain textual reading of the Commodity Exchange Act. Federal law generally overrides state law.
The irony is just staggering. Because the states are too greedy to risk their own monopolies, they're going to walk right into a trap that loses them everything. The federal government will take control of the entire event contract space, and the states will get cut out of the loop entirely. No regulation, no taxes.
It is a devastating cell phone by the states, but there is one final, incredibly desperate move the states can make.
Oh, the wild card.
Right. If they lose on preemption and are backed into a corner, they have one asset left to play. It's a wild card that the political analysts describe as a high-stakes game of truth or dare.
And this is where things get truly dark and controversial. If the states lose the national markets to Wall Street, the only untapped market left for them to legalize and tax is high school sports betting.
Yeah. Just saying those words out loud feels wrong, doesn't it?
It feels incredibly gross. High school sports betting has always been the third rail of gambling in America. It's politically toxic. It's treated as completely sacred.
Absolutely.
Like, no state governor in their right mind has ever wanted to deal with the public backlash of allowing adults to gamble real money on teenagers playing Friday night football or, like, a high school basketball tournament.
Historically, that is totally true. But the twisted incentives of this legal war are shifting that reality. Remember how we talked about the CFTC trying to regulate these markets?
Yeah.
Recently, the CFTC issued what's called a Notice of Proposed Rulemaking, an NPRM. In that proposal, the CFTC explicitly carved out high school sports. They formally banned high school events from the federal prediction marketplace.
Okay, on the surface, that sounds like a good thing. The federal government is protecting kids.
It is a good thing ethically. But look at the financial incentives it creates. The federal government just said to the prediction markets, you can have the entire national market for NFL, NBA, elections, whatever, but you absolutely cannot touch high school sports.
Oh, I see.
By doing that, the federal government accidentally created an exclusive business opportunity for the states.
A monopoly. The only monopoly left.
Exactly. Picture a desperate state legislature. They are watching hundreds of millions of dollars in tax revenues bleed out to these federal prediction platforms, and there's nothing they can do about it.
Right.
Then they look at that federal carve-out and say, wait a minute, Washington won't offer high school betting. If we legalize it locally, the federal markets can't compete with us. We get the revenue all to ourselves. They will reach for the toxic breadcrumbs left behind by the feds just to survive.
But wait, if they do that, if a state crosses that moral line and legalizes high school sports betting just despite the prediction markets and grabs some tax revenue,
Yeah.
isn't that stepping right into another trap?
It is the final checkmate move. If the states actually cross that line, they hand the federal government the ultimate fatal lawsuit on a silver platter.
Because the feds will sue them?
Instantly. The federal government, likely joined by the prediction platforms themselves, will immediately sue the states. And this time, the optics for the states are horrific.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The feds will walk into court with a perfectly clean narrative. They will say, Your Honor, we were happily coexisting, but the states just expanded their gambling operations into an area that federal law explicitly does not permit in order to protect minors. We are simply enforcing the statute.
Oh, man. The states will look like absolute villains. They're fighting to gamble on kids, and the feds are fighting to stop it. The states will absolutely lose that lawsuit.
They will lose catastrophically. The federal courts will strike down the state laws. The prediction markets will become completely entrenched. essentially too big to fail, and the United States will have effectively and permanently nationalized sports gambling under the banner of financial commodities.
It is mind-blowing, and it really reminds me of an analogy I saw in the materials regarding the historical bucket shops of the 1920s.
Oh, that is a perfect historical parallel.
For those who don't know, back in the 1920s, before the massive securities regulations, you had these places called bucket shops in every major city. You would walk in, and there would be a ticker tape showing stock prices.
Right.
But you didn't actually buy the stock. You were just placing a bet with the house on whether the stock price would go up or down.
It was pure gambling disguised as investing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
The bucket shop operators told the American public, this is the democratization of finance. We're letting the little guy participate in Wall Street. But ultimately, it was a massive grift. It exposed everyday people to insane financial risks without them owning any actual underlying asset.
Yep.
The government eventually had to step in and crush them because they were destroying people's lives.
And look at what is happening today. History is just rhyming. Today, they aren't calling them bucket shops. They're calling them prediction markets. They aren't calling it betting. They're calling it trading event contracts.
Right.
But the fundamental mechanism of risk putting your money on the line over a contingent event you have no control over is the exact same.
It's incredible. So to sort of summarize this entirely accidental, multi-billion-dollar Kalshi story, we started with a massive 360,000-word financial reform blueprint called Dodd Frank, meant to protect Americans from a repeat of the 2008 financial ruin. But because Congress used the word gaming instead of gambling, a legal loophole opened.
Yeah. Then a regulatory agency, the CFTC, voluntarily surrendered its own massive authority in a federal courtroom because it tried to play cute with definitions.
Which allowed a single prediction market to bypass state gambling laws, triggering a 90-case spaghetti monster of litigation.
And because the states are too addicted to their own sports betting tax revenues to make the winning argument at the Supreme Court, they're going to walk right into a game theory trap that ultimately leads to the total nationalization of sports betting in America.
It is a masterclass in how a tiny crack in a legal foundation can eventually bring down the entire house.
It really is.
Seems like those words from Congress didn't just fail to come out right. They might have accidentally rewritten the fundamental rules of society. Thank you so much for joining us on this custom deep dive today. We hope we've given you a lot to think about, and as always, keep questioning the fine print.